Welcome back to New World Tank Mastery, where I, Ty James, your mother's favorite online video game tank. I know. It's sad, but it's true. Anyways, what I do is I give you all the different types of tanking and I take you through all the dungeons and all that kinds of stuff regarding New World. And today, because you guys have asked via Discord and in comments for PvP, today we're going to be talking about PvP tanking in New World. You guys wanted some PvP tips? Well, here we go. Just the tips is all I'm going to give you. Because Season 10 is coming out in a couple days, so I was going to put together a full PvP build video for you, but I really don't want you guys wasting your resources trying to gather all this best in slot gear and doing all the upgrades, using armor matrices and chromatic seals and all that good stuff just for about 2 days worth of use, because when Season 10 hits, it's pretty much all going to be probably irrelevant and or obsolete. So when Season 10 does drop and we get a good idea about what the infixes are, what the 4 perk combos from M3s are going to be like, how attributes are going to work, how many we're going to get from our level, as well as like gear sets and all that kinds of good stuff, then we can put together the ultimate tank PvP build for you through theory crafting and get you guys set up nicely. So in the meantime, instead, today what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about what your role is as a tank in PvP, kind of how it differs in PvE, what that role kind of transpires into when we're talking about the different types of PvP that New World offers. I am going to touch on the different types. And then I'm also going to talk about kind of like what the effectiveness of being a tank really is, and maybe if it's something that you even want to consider doing, because you really got to understand the role. And then I'm also going to talk about some do's and don'ts that might help you, whether you have the greatest build or not. These are key things to keep in mind when you're going to be doing PvP tanking to ensure that you're successful. Okay, so with that in mind, let's get into the video. All right, so what is mainly the difference between, say, PvE tanking and PvP tanking? A few things. One is you have your taunts in PvE and you have taunts in PvP. And I will tell you that you do have a way of taunting in PvP. Okay, and I'll get to that. It'll be later in the video and you're going to like it. So what happens when I taunt in PvE? Basically, I'm pulling the aggro and I'm providing peel for my team, and I'm causing the AI to focus their attacks on me. Now, what's kind of like another difference of PvE and PvP is PvE can be very predictable, right? The AI generally do the same type of attacks. They're going to be in the same kind of spot in a dungeon. The boss is going to have the same kind of mechanics every time you fight them. So it's very predictable. You memorize those things and you get really good at doing it because you know how the AI is going to act. PvP is very unpredictable. You don't know what the other player's build is all the time. You don't know how their skills set up. You don't know what their rotation might be. If they are trying to do something meta, yeah, you can study the meta and you can kind of get a rough idea about what they're going to do. Maybe you can memorize what the telegraphs on their moves are. But PvP is still inherently unpredictable because it's another player, not an AI. Okay. Now, the reason why I say that is when you're thinking about becoming a tank for PvP and you're thinking about, hey, what's going to be the best in slot? What's going to be the best build? How do I set up? What are my best skills? All those kinds of things. You have to understand that you need to be very flexible because of the unpredictability of PvP. So for example, say the meta right now is like blunderbuss and fire staff users in PvP. So you as a tank, to prepare for that, you're like, hey, you know what? I'm going to get a bunch of fire resistance, fire absorption, and things like that so that I can be as tanky as possible against that enemy. So you go out into the world, you're feeling great, you've got all this tanky gear on, and all of a sudden you come across a guy that, say, is GreatSword and Sword and Shield, and all he primarily does is slash damage. And you don't really have any slash absorption because you were building yourself out to be against blunderbuss fire staff. So you're going to get melted. Like you don't have the right absorption. So when I say talk about being flexible is you have to kind of predict what your gear all encompassing, like global damage and health and different types of things and strategies because of the unpredictability of PvP. Okay. Now, there are different types of PvP, and before I get into what tanking really looks like in each of those types, instead, let's give you some solid foundation of what your role is as a pure tank in PvP. Okay? And this is going to determine whether you actually want to be a tank or not. Is your role as a pure tank damage? No, it's not. Okay, you are actually going to do significantly less damage than somebody that is not set up as a tank, that is purely set up as DPS, and you have to be okay with that. All right. Now, what your role is as a pure tank in PvP is a guardian of the healer, and sometimes a guardian of your squishiest, highest damage DPS team member. Okay, you are there to protect the healer. All right, and I'm going to tell you how you can do the peel and all those types of things. So, say, for example, you're in a group, you have a healer, you have a few DPS with you, and you're going up against an enemy team. They're going to send somebody in that I like to call the rabbit, all right? And I'll kind of bring this all together for you in a second. So they're going to send somebody in. He's going to more than likely try to target the healer, okay? What you want to do to maximize your effectiveness as a tank is, one, you want to have a lot of self-sustain, you want to have a lot of defenses, but you want to make sure you're utilizing a lot of CC. You want a lot of CC capability because you want to provide peel for that healer. Your healer's there to keep you alive, you're there to keep the healer alive. If somebody dives in on your healer, you need to respond, CC that person, provide enough CC and timing so that your healer can kite or get away, right? And then you continue to do damage. Now, what happens if, and this is a don't, this is something that happens all the time, and I see people make this mistake as a tank, and I'm just like, what are you doing? Don't do this. So say this rabbit comes in, he jumps on your healer, and you CC him down, you're smacking him, then you see him at about like 10% health, he rolls out and he takes off running. Do you chase him to try to finish him off? You're like, I know I can get this guy. He's got 10% health. I need one more hit, and one more hit, and one more hit, and you're running after this dude. What did you just do? You chased the rabbit. And what happens is when you chase the rabbit, you leave your healer and your DPS behind. You're leaving them exposed for the other team to come in and mollywop them, right? Wipe them out, murk them, whatever you want to call it, okay? So you just failed your job as the tank because you are no longer providing a protective layer for your healer and your DPS, okay? You are not the chase down and go finish off the enemy player character. That is not your job as the tank. Let somebody that's either ranged or a pure damage DPS that has high mobility, high haste, and all those things go chase the character that has the high haste and high mobility. Otherwise, what's going to happen is you're going to get kited. You're never going to catch up to them. You're never going to be able to do enough damage to finish them off. And instead, they're just going to keep kiting you around, peeling you away from your healer instead of you providing the peel. Now, same scenario, guy jumps in on your healer. You stun him, you get your CC off, you get him down to 10% health, and this guy, instead of rolling away, decides to continue pursuing your healer. At that point, is it okay to utilize your skill rotation to try to finish him off? Absolutely, because what you're trying to do is you're still trying to provide peel for your healer by murking this guy, right? You are still actively trying to protect your healer, all right? So trust me, if you go off chasing this rabbit and you leave your healer exposed, your healer's not going to want to heal you anymore. They're going to be like, yo, bro, like, one, you just ran outside of my heal range, and two, you just left me to the wolves. Like, do not do that. That is like a big no-no. Do not do that as a tank. You do not want to be that guy, and you don't want to get that reputation in game as being the guy that just always leaves your team because you go off chasing people you think you're going to finish off, and you never end up finishing off. And even if you did, you get one kill, they wipe your entire team, they get 5 kills. Really, what was the point of it? Okay, so that is one way you provide peel. There's another way you can provide peel, depending on the type of game mode you're in, and depending on your build. So the other way you can provide peel for your team, and you can be a good tank, is instead of just staying glued to your healer, maybe you become an armored rabbit. You go running in, and who are you supposed to focus? Are you supposed to focus the enemy tank? Are you supposed to focus the enemy's DPS? Or are you supposed to focus the healer? If you know the answer, put it down in the comments below. And I'll give you about 5 seconds before I tell you the answer. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, that was 5 seconds. Healer, you want to get in there and CC and disrupt the healer. You want to take the focus of the healer from being able to heal the enemy team to, I need to keep myself alive and get away from this tank. You use your CC abilities to lock down this healer and keep him from healing, okay? In doing so, this is what's going to happen. You jump on that healer and you're stuck to him like glue, and you're just smacking him, CCing him. He's healing himself, right? He cannot focus on healing his whole team. He's focusing on keeping himself alive. What do you think he's going to do in the voice chat? He's going to be like, help, somebody get this tank off me. He won't leave me alone. This son of my mother, right? So the enemy team is going to be like, oh, we need to protect our healer. So they're all going to turn and then focus on you. Congratulations, you just did a PvP taunt. You just pulled aggro in PvP. By going after their healer, the person that's supposed to be keeping them alive, they are going to want to try to burn you down for going after the healer. Because if you keep CCing that healer and keep them from healing, they're all going to die. So you are in turn doing a taunt in PvP. I mean, you can go into voice chat and be like, neener, right? And say, hey, I taunted them. Essentially, that's what you're doing, okay? You're providing peel for your team because you're taking the focus of their DPS off of your healer and your DPS and taking it all on you, right? Now, this only works if you have a healer that is willing to put themselves, like maybe get a little bit close to where they can keep their heals on you, because you're going to be taking a massive amount of damage all at once. Because once they all turn on you, all that damage is then going to be on you. So you're going to want to leverage your CC and your defensive skills simultaneously so that you can keep your CC up on that enemy healer while your self-sustain, your fortifications, and all those things that you need to use for your self-healing, because you're going to be taking a lot of damage. So be prepared for that. But that is just another way you provide peel. Now, what happens is you drop that healer down, okay? And he rolls away and he pulls himself out of range of healing his own team. Do you then chase that healer down to finish him off? No, you bounce back and you start CCing. You stay within heal range of your healer and you start CCing the DPS to allow your DPS to come in and wipe them all clean, wipe them up, right? So that is kind of like your primary job as a full tank. Now, I'm not talking about like a bruiser, medium build, higher damage, sustainability. You have a whole different role, right? But if you're purely a tank in PvP, you have to understand your job isn't to get the finishing kill. Your job is disruption and your job is protection, okay? That is your job as a tank. Now, talking about that, let's see how that kind of like transpires into the different types of PvP content, okay? So let's go into our PvP menu or our activities menu, and let's talk about the different types of PvP content. So first one up is Outpost Rush. Outpost Rush is a 20 versus 20 instance PvP control points, right? There's 3 different control points that you have to hold. The more control points you have, the more points your team gets faster. That whoever has the highest points at the end of the match wins, okay? So how does your tank role coincide into Outpost Rush? The advantage you have as a tank is purely holding capture points, okay? That, like, if you are a pure PvP tank, capture points is probably going to be like your bread and butter. Sitting on a capture point, preventing the other team from capping it, or capping it yourself. If you have a healer with you that can keep your health up and all you're doing is CCing people and you're not moving, they can't kill you, so you're just holding that point, you're giving your team points, okay? Now, going out and it's the same concept. You're holding that point. You get somebody low. They run outside the control point area, and then you go chasing after them. It's the same thing as chasing the rabbit. Okay, as a tank, pure tank, your job: hold those control points, protect your healer at all costs, and stay on that control point. That's basically like your role. Yes, are there PvP builds that are pure tank that can do a decent amount of damage? Yes, they can do a decent amount of damage, but their role is not damage. So you have to remember that. Although you can do some damage, your role is not damage. So hold the control point, protect your healer, win. I like that. You should put that on a t-shirt. Okay, so now let's talk about capture the flag. Say you do a nice 2.5 week queue and you finally get into a capture the flag. At least that's how it is on El Dorado server. I think I've probably been in queue for capture the flag for, I don't know, 3 weeks at this point, maybe 4 weeks, and it still hasn't popped. Anyways, so say you happen to get into capture the flag. What is your role as a pure tank in capture the flag? Let me see if you guys can get it. Okay, I waited long enough. You are the flag go-getter. All right, and I'm going to tell you why. So in this game, there is a bit of time for you to grab, like to interact with the flag, and your CC, most CCs, if you have a 2-second CC, if you're able to group CC the people defending the flag, it is enough time for you to grab that flag. Okay. Now keep in mind, all these things really rely on you having a healer. All right. So a tank without a healer is basically a floor tank. But say you have a healer, you're going to go after their flag. People are going to be standing on the flag trying to hit you to prevent you from grabbing the flag. Save your CCs to when you get there, you CC lock, grab their flag, and enjoy the heals and use your self-sustain and slowly but surely make your way back to your flag, because you will not die. If you are a pure tank, it'll be incredibly hard for them to kill you, especially if you have a healer on you. And if you don't die, you do not drop the flag, right? So some teams will be like, no, I want our highest mobility character with all the haste to grab the flag. The problem is if they get locked down or if they get people on top of them, they're too squishy. They're going to die. They're going to drop the flag, right? And then the flag can get picked up by the enemy team, brought back to their side. We don't want that. You want a heavy juggernaut tank that can't be killed to grab the flag, make their way back. And at that point, you have the enemy flag. You're just going to chill at your flag point in case they have it, waiting for them to get killed, bring your flag back, and then you score, right? If they haven't gotten the flag, you're just going to make your way over to the flag and you're going to keep capturing it, get the points, boom, you guys win. That simple, right? So that's more your role. It's less of being armored rabbit or for the peel or things like that. Beeline straight for their flag, CC everybody, grab the flag, and use your sustain, use your defenses to get the flag back to your location without dying so you don't drop it. But like I said, that's if you want to deal with like a 3-week queue for capture the flag. And let me know if it pops on your server. Let me know. I might switch servers so I can actually play this game mode more often, because unfortunately it doesn't happen. Okay. Now let's talk about 3v3 arenas. 3v3 is just that. It's 3 players versus 3 players in a small little arena. Now, this is one of those PvP modes where being a tank, you do not have an advantage for very long. Okay. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to kind of break this down for you. So it's very disadvantageous to be a tank in 3v3 arena. Most of the time in a 3v3 arena, you're going to queue. If you're queued as a tank, you're going to end up with 2 DPS and 1 tank, no healer. And you're going to be up against a team with, say, a healer and 2 DPS or just 3 DPS. Okay, so you would think, okay, yeah, but I'm tanky, so I should be able to survive all the damage and all that. True. But as the rounds progress, so it's done in this round, next round, right? So as the rounds progress and the timer continues to tick in the arena, the arena will start to engulf in flames and start causing damage if you're out in the outskirts and forcing everybody more to the middle, which doesn't seem like a bad idea because you want people up on you. But as the round progresses, your sustain, your healing, and your self-sustain and defensive capability starts to decrease. Okay. So, which means the advantage you have as a tank as the rounds progress actually decreases. Your advantage decreases. Now let's look at somebody who's just pure damage. As the round progresses, yes, their sustain and healing and defensive capability starts to drop too, but their advantage is their damage. and their damage does not decrease as the round progresses. Okay, so your advantage is the sustain, right? Their advantage is damage. As that round progresses, you're starting to lose your advantage over time. Their pure advantage does not lose. So you're gapping yourself between your tactic and their tactic. Their tactic's going to win. Okay? So that's why being a tank in 3v3 arena, unless you have some, God mode build where you do so much burst damage as a tank, maybe like some sort of hammer armor breaker type of like build where you are just like crazy amounts of damage in burst and tanky, they don't kind of go together. I mean, honestly, a medium load Bruiser would probably suit you way better in 3v3 than just being a pure tank. Because like I said, the advantage of being a tank is the sustain and defensive capability is going to diminish over time. So I wouldn't suggest going into a 3v3 arena as just a pure tank. It's not going to be a great time. If you have a healer, you would think, oh yeah, but I have a healer. That's cool and all, but any kind of healing, whether it's from the healer or your pots or your lifesteal, your self-sustain, any of those types of heals diminish over time. So even having a pocket healer, their healing effectiveness also diminishes. Okay, so it's just something to keep in mind. You're going to lose your advantage. Okay, now that kind of also goes with free-for-all zone, right? So another form of PvP is if you go to your map and you go to Cutlass Keys down here on the left, right? So this zone that's kind of got like this highlighted area right here, this zone is the free-for-all zone, right? So anything in here, you're not supposed to have groups. It's supposed to be everybody is against everybody, right? But unfortunately, at least on my server, that's not the case. People kind of group up, even though they can't be in an actual group. They just run around with each other and they attack the same person and don't attack each other. And yes, they can't heal each other, but they also will just 3v1 you all the time, right? So being a tank, you'd be like, yeah, but I want to be super tanky so I don't die in that area. Kinda. So Amazon Games, in their infinite wisdom on how they're going to deal with people grouping up in the free-for-all zone, made it to where if you're around a character without killing them and at a certain amount of time, you will get a debuff, and that debuffs or lowers your damage and also lowers your defensive capability, healing, all those kinds of things. So if you're a tank that doesn't output a whole lot of damage and you're trying to attack somebody and it's taking you forever to kill them because you don't do a lot of damage, it's taking them forever to kill you because you don't have a lot of defenses, you're just going to stack a debuff because they did not write the code in the game that if you're actively in a battle with somebody that you don't get the debuff. You will get the debuff. Okay? Now, this is what you got to keep in mind. Is your advantage, just like in the 3v3, is your sustain and your defensive capabilities, right? That's your advantage as being a tank. If you're debuffed to where you're losing both of those things, you're losing your self-sustain advantage and you're losing your defensive capability, you are once again losing your advantage. Yes, that enemy player, if they get a debuff on them, is going to do less damage overall and also receive more damage, but the scale at which they're losing damage is different compared to you losing damage and defensive capability. So you are losing like double. Like the debuff is double bad, like really bad for you as a tank, because you are not only doing less damage than you were already doing less damage before, but you were also losing that defensive capability. So once again, if you want to be more tanky, I would still suggest, if you're going to do free-for-all zone, doing more of a medium load Bruiser build than a full tank build, okay? Because you also will not have the advantage of a healer in the free-for-all zone, okay? And then lastly, let's talk about like open world PvP, whether it's castle sieges, wars, races, things like that, or just flagging yourself, going out there and fighting. Okay. Most of the time, these are going to be set up in Zergs, right? So it's going to be you versus like 30 people. You might have a pocket healer. You might not. You might get in on a raid, and then it's like a amount of fun PvP. So it's very similar to Outpost Rush, what your role is, right? Your role is protecting the healer, protecting your your super squishy DPS, but mainly staying with your healer. Now, if you're doing a castle siege, is it advantageous for you to be tanky, to be sitting there on the capture control point? No. Why? Because if you're the only one on that capture control point, it's not going to cap anytime soon, right? It's going to take forever. You'd be better off suited providing a layer of protection for your healer so that you guys can wipe the enemy team, and then your whole team come in and sit on the capture point to capture it a little faster, capture the castle or the fort a little faster, okay? So you are a frontline tank in open world PvP, but just keep in mind, you also are there to provide peel for your healer. That is your primary thing. So same thing. Do not go chase the rabbit. Do not go after that guy that, you know, comes in, he attacks your healer, you get him down super low, takes off, and then you run outside the fort and your healer has no line of sight of you, can't get the heals, you left him hanging, and then you're out there fighting 20 people on your own. Okay? It's just not, it's not good. All right? So that's the different types of PvP that New World offers, and kind of how you would, I guess, how you would leverage your advantages and disadvantages in being a full-on tanky boy, okay? So let me talk about damage real quick and why I say the damage disadvantage for being in full heavy gear in PvP, okay? So right now I'm in medium. Let me switch over to a heavy real quick. All right, now I'm in heavy gear. So let me move my cam so you guys can see what I'm talking about. So if I look at heavy right here, my base damage, right? This is not empowerment. This is my base damage is minus 15%. My outgoing healing, including self-healing, okay, down 30%. But I do gain some increased crowd control duration reduction by 20%. I get one dodge or two dodges, which is a directional step before I get exhausted. And that's even if you have a hardy ring. Okay, so even if you're running hardy, you still only get a 2 dodge chance because your stamina still costs 55 stam. Okay. And then after taking a melee hit, you cannot run after half a second, which, you know, whatever. You're there to, you know, absorb damage anyways. And then your PvP, your crit damage taken is reduced by 25%. All sounds great, minus the base damage, okay? So let's switch over to, let's go this logging gears just so you can see what light is. Base damage plus 15%, which means if you're fighting somebody in a light loadout and you're a heavy loadout, base damage, there is a 30% difference in their output of damage versus your output of damage. 30%. That's just base damage. That has nothing to do with empowerment. And I'm going to explain that right after this. Okay. In a light loadout, they get 3 dodge rolls if they have a hardy ring. See? Before they become exhausted and they stand break. They get 1, 2, 3 dodge rolls. You get 2. So they get 3 opportunities to completely avoid damage. You get 2. Another disadvantage, right? And then in reality, their crit damage taken is still minus 15% in PvP. So only a 10% difference than what you have. And then they do get a 0.85 second where they can't run, but their dodge distance is reduced. But the thing is, keep in mind, they have 3 dodge rolls. So in that 0.85 seconds, by the time they dodge roll 3 times, they can run, and they're going to be faster than you. Their distance of running and getting away from you is a lot further than if you do one sidestep. You're here at the end of your 2 dodge rolls and your stam's broken. They get 1, 2, 3. Look at the distance. Right? You are not going to catch them. Do not chase the rabbit, okay? So that is what light does, okay? So let's talk about medium. Let's switch over to, let's say, this medium build right here. Okay, so medium build, 1, 2, 3 dodge rolls. They get 3 dodges before they become exhausted, just like in a light loadout. If you look, there's no plus 15%, but there's also no negative 15% damage. So inherently, a medium build is going to do 15% more base damage than a heavy build. Okay? So, and they're only going to, their crit damage reduction is still 20%. So they're really a medium build is only a 5% less crit damage reduction than a heavy build with 3 dodge rules. Okay, so let's talk about what the base damage and what I mean. So say, for example, this skill, Reap. Say that skill does 1,000 damage. We're just going to use this for easy math, okay? So say that skill does 1,000 damage. If you're in a heavy loadout, you're going to do 15% less base damage, meaning this same skill, in heavy, is going to deal 850 damage. If I'm in medium, it's going to deal 1,000. If I'm in light, it's going to deal 1,150 damage. Okay. Now let's talk about empowerment. If I get to the cap empowerment of 50%, okay, let's do the quick math. If I'm in medium build and I use this same skill and I'm empowered by 50%, that's going to do 1,500 damage. Okay. So let's talk about light. Because the base damage is 1,150, the 50% empowerment on that base damage is of the base damage, not the 1,000. So they get an increase of 50% over the 1,150, meaning that they get an additional 575 damage from their empowerment. Okay? Much more than what you would if your base damage was 15% less. So what that equates to is if I'm in a light loadout, this Reap instead does 1,725 damage. Now, if my base damage was 850 because I'm in a heavy loadout for that same skill, and I still get to 50% empowerment, I'm going to now do 1,275 damage. I'm barely going to be more than what the base damage is on a light user after I've been empowered by 50%. Okay, so that's nearly a 500 damage difference when they're empowered compared to non-empowered. It's about a 300 damage difference, right? So the scaling of base damage, when you start talking about empowerment, starts scaling how much damage they're really going to be outputting compared to how much damage you have the ability to output even at a 50% empowerment cap. Okay, so your disadvantage is damage. That is your disadvantage. You will not output nearly as much damage as somebody in a light or a medium loadout, even if you achieve your 50% empowerment, which is actually pretty easy. It's not very difficult to achieve a 50% empowerment. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of go over the reason why your damage output might be so low. Obviously, there's other ways, there's things that you need to keep in mind, like using honing zones like that to get the empower, using increase like slash damage if you're a slash guy. All that kind of thing can help boost up your damage. Using skills in the skill tree that increase the base damage of a certain skill, stuff like that. That's all good and dandy. But if you're already at a disadvantage of a 30% base damage disadvantage, that's actually like a 45% disadvantage when you talk about empowerment. Okay, so don't be surprised if you get a little discouraged. Let me move this back over here. If you get a little discouraged that, man, I just, like as a tank, I just don't feel like I'm really doing a whole lot, right? Well, keep in mind what your job is the CC, okay? Your job is protecting your team and not leaving them hanging out to dry. Okay, so real quick, let me touch on some of the, some of the skills, because in reality, like some of the skills that I use in PvP, they probably won't change that much coming into season 10, unless obviously they release some sort of, artifact or some sort of infix or some sort of gear that really kind of changes the build. And obviously they're kind of changing that. Any weapon that has, a solo stat is going to have 2 stat scaling. So how that's actually going to affect builds, it might not, right? Like the Great Axe is going to also get int. So if you're running Abyss, it's not really going to change anything because, it already, the perk for that artifact is allow you to run int. So I don't know. We'll see what the changes are. So instead, let me show you some of the skills that I use in PvP. So if I'm running a sword and shield in PvP, this is kind of like my bread and butter right here. Let me make sure my cam is completely out the way so you guys can see the skills. Okay. So this is the skill set I use. So feel free to screenshot or bookmark or whatever you want And maybe I'll put in the timestamp below each skill tree so you can just click on it, right? So I use Shield Rush, I use Leaping Strike, I use Upheaval. Okay, I do not use Whirling Blade. Some people like it. I just don't like the way it feels. I like Upheaval much better. It is a strong, hard-hitting freaking skill right here. This is like your bread and butter, right? Leaping Strike's a great gap closer, plus it applies a slow. This applies a stagger and a slow. If you slow somebody, you do extra damage, right? You're easy. It's really easy to get to your empowerment cap with Sword and Shield because you have 10% here. You get a heavy attack. You're at 30%. With a Honing Stone, that's another 7%. So just with leadership and this, you're at 47% empowerment right then and there. Okay. So it's really easy to get to your 50% cap with Sword and Shield. Okay. So that's my Sword and Shield skill tree. Let's look at Flail. So this is my PvP Flail. I will say, if you're running Flail and PvP, it's better to do it without a shield, but that's just my personal opinion. It does more damage. And although, yeah, you're losing the 4 perks, this is not PvE, this is PvP. In PvP, the Flail is better without a shield. Okay, so I would not run Sword and Shield and Flail and Shield in PvP. That's just me. Okay, so I run Trip, I run Eruption, and I always add Powerful Eruption to my gear, and I run Vortex, in which I add a Mending Vortex. You can add Thwarting Trip. I find that making sure you have Powerful Eruption and Mending Vortex is much better in PvP than Thwarting Trip. Okay, I don't run Bludgeon, I don't run Barrage, and I don't run Smite in PvP. I use the CC from Trip, I erupt them, I get some attacks on them, I use Vortex to lock them down, and they're usually dead at that point. Okay, Flail and Shield is amazing. Spear. So this is what I run as a tank for my Spear PvP, whether I'm going like a Bruiser build, if I'm going a light Dex build, whatever. This I have found is probably the best, unless you're running like a Javelin with a Scorpion Sting or something. If you're just using your Spear for the utility, the Trip or the Sweep and the coup de grace, this right here, Skewer, Sweep, and Cyclone. Make sure you have Mending Cyclone, right? Very, 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 very powerful skill in PvP. Okay, so that's Spear. Great Axe. I have 2 different Great Axe loadouts. This one is if I'm not running Tempest Fury. If I'm running Tempest Fury, then I don't run Maelstrom. I run Whirlwind. Everything else stays the same. It's just these 4 points are in Whirlwind instead. But if I'm not running Tempest Fury, then I actually run Maelstrom because I run Enfeebling Maelstrom so I can weaken the targets with Maelstrom. I keep Reap. I like running Crippling Reap so I can slow them. And then I only put 1 point in this. This is to either get an escape or to chase down some little baddie that thinks he can run away from me. And I always run Bloodlust because I want that extra empower and the 20% movement speed if I'm chasing somebody down and they're within 14 meters of me. If they're a hasty little boy, they're going to be like, how come this dude's still on top of me? Because I'm running Bloodlust. Okay. So Hammer. Okay. All right. This is going to take a while. All right. There is like probably 15 different types of really good Hammer skill loadouts. It's really depending on what content you're doing, like which version of PvP you're doing and which Hammer you're running. Okay. I think that's the best way to put it. So if you are strictly going, you're a CC, just freaking annoying ass CC tank, and that's what you want, then you probably want to run Wrecking Ball with Shockwave and probably Clear Out. Okay. Because that way you get a knockback, you get a hard CC stun, and you get a knockdown. Okay. If you want a good amount of CC, like a hard CC, like a 2-second hard CC, but you also want a good amount of damage, then you're going to run Mighty Gavel, Armor Breaker, and Shockwave. If you're running like Mjolnir or you're running, what's the other artifact with the Clear Out? It's escaping my brain right now. But if you're running that artifact, then you probably want to run Clear Out because you're going to knock people back and it's going to cause them to ignite a bunch of people. It's a lot of fun, right? So depending on which artifact you're using or which hammer you're using, there's all different versions of this build, but this is a good one if you want a good amount of CC and you want a good amount of damage. run this. If you strictly, like I said, want to be CC, run Wrecking Ball, run Shockwave, and run Clear Out, so that you're just doing a bunch of CC, and then run this to where you're slowing them down when you hit them with an ability. It's a 20-second slow, or 20% slow for 4 seconds. So it's really good if you're just trying to be a CC bot. Okay, so that's WarHammer. GreatSword, one of my favorite weapons to run. And once again, there's all different kinds of people out there telling you what's going to be the best thing to run as a PvP tank or just in PvP general. I have found so far, I've had the most success with this version. Reason being, Roaring Rupture, I like having the cleanse from Roaring Rupture and the CC immunity. Steadfast Strike gives me a stagger and a pullback. So if I get somebody with it and they're trying to run away from me, not only does it stagger them, but it pulls them to me slightly and gives me stamina. Okay. And then Relentless Rush is great for escape or for the self-healing. If I'm in an onslaught or if I'm in defiant stance and I use this to get out, I'm going to get 15% heal. Do not sleep on that heal. It is a very good heal. Okay. But for the most part, I'm using this for the chunkin heavies in Path of Defiance, and right here, the Undying Defiance. You can chunk people with heavies while you have a guard and a block in front of you that's also self-healing. So, like I said, this has been probably my bread and butter for my greatsword. I have run Skyward Slash before. The problem is Skyward Slash, one, it's very telegraphed. It's very easy to see it's coming, and it's very slow, and it kind of locks you in the animation. And there's no animation canceling in Skyward Slash. So while you're up in the air and you're trying to slash down, you're taking a lot of damage, and there's nothing you can do about it. So I have found in PvP situations, this just does not do me justice as well as getting the cleanse and the CC immunity and the stagger, right? So I still always run Relentless Rush, Steadfast, and Roaring Rupture. Until they change something, I find that's the best. Calamity Counter, I see a lot of greatsword users use this and they die. That's the best way to put it. So, yeah, Calamity Counter makes you feel like you're immune to a bunch of damage, but you will die using it. Okay, it locks you in place. You have no mobility. Somebody can just kite away from the attack afterwards, and because all they got to be is more than 4 meters away from you. 4 meters is right there. So as long as they're further than that, they will not be hit by your Calamity Counter attack. Right. So it's honestly, what happens is it's just a wasted skill. Okay. So those are the main tank weapons. Obviously there's like blunderbuss and stuff like that. People will run that they're doing like an in your face heavy blunderbuss build. I don't prefer that play style, because you have less CC and you have less utility as being a tank. That's more for doing damage. Okay. So that's what I have for you today about PvP. If I missed something or there was a specific question you had, I was trying to make this video not so drawn out, and I thought I would do my best to try to get all that information. It's a lot of info, and there's still more I could touch on, more things I could really dive deep into, but I just wanted to kind of give you a lot of those tips and tricks on how to leverage tanking in New World for PvP. Although I'm telling you that I think you'd be happier running a Juggernaut medium load Bruiser build, right? In your face Bruiser build, because you're going to do more damage in a medium load. You're still going to be somewhat tanky. You're still going to be somewhat defensive. But in my opinion, I think that's a better version for PvP than going pure tank. But like I said before in my other videos, this is a video game. And I want you to enjoy the video game, and I want you to enjoy what you're doing and having a good time and playing the play style you want to play. That's what's beautiful about this game, is you're not locked into a class or a specific archetype. You can switch and change and do whatever the heck you want and enjoy the game playing it the way you want. Real quick, before I go, I almost forgot attributes. The reason why I was only going to touch on this slightly is because of... in season 10, in a couple days, they are changing attributes, how many we're going to get. It's going to be linked to your level, all that good stuff. So things to keep in mind with attributes. Your constitution as a tank, think of it kind of like your difficulty slider bar. Base, I would suggest bare minimum 100 con, no matter what. Bare minimum 100 con if you're going to be any kind of tank. And the harder the difficulty or the less experience you have as a tank, the more con you run. Does that make sense, guys? So think of it like your difficulty slider. If you are very, very experienced in PvP and you're very, very experienced in self-sustain, blocking, dodging, rolling, all that stuff, skill level, you can run less con. The more con you have is more of like your difficulty slider. Just keep in mind, the more con you run, the less overall damage you're going to do because you have less points to put towards any of your damage attributes. Okay? But that's how you run your constitution. Play with it. See how you like it. Me personally, this is what I normally run in a medium Bruiser build. I run 102, and I use a 48 strength food. The particular build I'm talking about right now is my Great Axe and my Crescent's Wave. So I actually run 100 dex because my GreatSword does benefit from dex. And then I dump the rest into strength. All right, now this is going to obviously change depending on what weapons I'm using and my my gear. But for the most part, I run a 48 con food, so I hit 150 constitution, so I get less critical damage taken. I run 100 dex so that I get an extra 5% base damage while my stamina is not full. And usually my stamina is never full because I'm doing a lot of dodges in medium load. And then I run a full way over 350 strength so that my axe and my greatsword both scale with the strength. Okay, so that's just a quick touch on attributes. But like I said, all that's going to change in season 10. So don't, play with it right now. Use the next couple of days to kind of get an idea of like, what's your skill level in PvP and how much con you're thinking you want to run. But like I said, once season 10 hits, I will produce a tank video and also like a Bruiser build video and allow you to kind of look at the kind of differences of both and kind of make your decision on what's your play style and what do you like to do. Okay, so I hope that helped. If you got any value out of this video, like the video. If you have the hype feature, I don't know if it's unlocked yet. I really don't even know what that does, but if you want to hype the video, please, by all means, I would love if you guys did. Comment below what's like your favorite PvP tip that you want to give to the community. Hit us up on Discord. I'll link that down in the description below. And don't forget, please don't forget this. Say hi to your mom for me. All right, I'll see you guys in the next video.